President Cyril Ramaphosa says his administration is seriously considering proposals for unemployed South Africans aged between 18 and 59 years to receive some kind of basic income grant. This as more than 40 civil society organizations have mobilized to demand that government urgently introduce a monthly payment of about 1,268, and that to respond to the poverty crisis in South Africa. The Women's League Centre is one of those civil society groups taking part in that basic income grant national strategy, if you like. It includes litigation to force government's hand on this initiative. Let's get a sense of what else we should think about. Bring in the Women's League Centre Director, Seehaam, Samai, who joins us now via our video link. Seehaam, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time. There's plenty to consider here, isn't it? But perhaps let's start by just ventilating what evidence we have that actually shows that an income grant would work.
Thank you very much. I think one of the myths, there's two myths that I really want to get away from, which is the one is that we cannot afford the basic income grant. What the coalition, what we need to understand is that in the late 1990s, as far back as 2000, there was a significant push that was done already by trade unions, by civil society organizations. So the work that we are currently doing in terms of the 40 organizations and different people that are working on the income grant is building on previous work that has already been done, and one of it was also the Taylor Commission, which recommended a grant for all. But one of the challenges were that we can't afford it. But what has been done over the past couple of years was to be able to assess how do we finance, how do we start thinking about financing of and how do we start paying the universal basic income grant from the fiscus. And so, yes, it requires a careful analysis of where the funds may be derived from, particularly in the context of COVID. And I think it's important that we understand this, that government has already implemented a COVID-19 grant and also a caregiver grant of 580 and then a 500 top up, and we need 350 and 500, apologies. And we need to understand that it has already been shown that government can provide a basic income grant for those between the ages of 18 and 59. Now, why are we looking at the ages between 18 and 59? It is particularly for those that is in the medium term. It's a complementary form of social assistance to those that where it ensures that every person is entitled to a certain amount of monthly income. And in the context of the persistent hunger, declining incomes and job losses, that this income support should be for the ages between 18 and 59. And the design of it, why do we say it's universal? Because it applies to all. It's basic because it gives a resource transfer that would make a difference in people's living conditions. And also, it's an income, it's a cash benefit, and it's a guarantee, it's an insurance that government can provide every person with income necessary to survive. There was one other myth that I just wanted to speak about, which was that it was going to be a form of handout. And we need to be able to understand it is incorrect to see grants as a form of handout or something which is to substitute economic activity. Rather, grants reward unpaid labor. It supports sources of other income. It encourages human capital development, and it forms a crucial part of a broader ecosystem that grows the economy and supports livelihood. And government has a relatively functional mechanism for putting money in the hands of caregivers and supporters and the disabled, but it has been dysfunctional in large groupings of adults between the ages of 18 and 59. So like I said before, those are two myths that we need to be looked at, that the government can't afford the universal basic income grant, and secondly, that this is not a form of handout.
Sure. The reason why I asked you my question was because there are those among us who believe that something like this is going to increase dependency on the state, as opposed to, I guess, allowing people to be proactive in whatever ways they can to be more active participants in our economy. I mean, what kind of response do we have to something like that with the empirical data at our disposal?
Well, international evidence from a range of countries have highlighted the positive effects of the universal basic income grant, many of which counter the harmful effects of just, also the COVID. And this particular study was from Kenya, which over the course of the pandemic, it showed that cash transfers reduced hunger, skipped meals, and had small improvements for dietary diversity. One of the challenges was that between the 18 and if the universal basic income grant is also not provided, the long-term consequences of stunting, of children dropping out of school, etc., has huge impacts for our economy. And we need to be able to see how is it that we'll be able to deal with this myth that we cannot afford the basic income grant, and that there is enough international studies to reflect the importance of the universal basic income grant.
I have to ask about the figure that's being touted about. It's about 1,268 rand, very specific,
yes.
and a far cry from
yes.
the 350 that was received during the COVID times.
Yes.
Speak to us about that.
Well, one of it is that what we are looking at is that the immediate, we are asking for a reinstatement, and that amount is only 585. But in the short term, we are looking at least for the food poverty line is 585. And then in the medium term, we are looking at a wild catch and use this to be able to complement the 1,286 gradually over a period of time, and that amount is the upper poverty line for persons.
Sure. The pushback you're receiving, if any, where is it mostly coming from, and what are you as a civil society organization reading into that?
Well, most of the pushback obviously is government. It's surrounding the two myths. It's around the fact that government is saying that they cannot afford the universal basic income grant, which we are saying that they are not using the fiscus to the optimum to be able to make a reality the universal basic income grant. We do believe that government can engage in a process of social consultation and long-term planning in order to ensure that the universal basic income grant is sufficient to meet the basic needs of people, and that is an overall transformation also of the social security system, and that is what we want. Also, the 40 organizations that have come together, one of the challenges, three of the things that we are looking at is lobbying and advocacy, as well as a broad legal strategy to be able to ensure that government realizes the right for social security, in particular the universal basic income grant. And we are saying that there is funding to be able to ensure that there is a universal basic income grant. We also believe that in terms of the discussions that was held last week and Friday, which will continue this particular Friday, is how do we expand the feminist economy? How do we link the universal basic income grant to challenges of how we can ensure that there's an overall transformation of the system, and also that it links up with the feminist economy.
Yeah, I started our discussion, sorry to come in there, Seehaam. I started our discussion by saying that the president says that his administration is seriously considering proposals. It might just be political speak. I wonder what that means for you, having been involved in discussions with government and had been involved in pushing for something like this. Does it mean anything at all?
Yes, there has been a lot of advocacy that was done. As I said, there's a huge amount of organizations that are currently lobbying and advocating government to be able to ensure that there is a basic income grant. We do have, for example, organizations like Black Sash, and we have, for example, the Broad campaign, which was the Pay Your Grant, that have done a huge amount and work in relation to ensuring that government brings about a universal basic income grant. So a lot of work has been done. And the work that we are doing is complementing the work of other campaigns to be able to ensure that government understands the necessity to have a universal basic income grant.
Well, there's a lot to think about. Seehaam, thanks very much indeed for helping us worm our way through some of those complexities. Seehaam Samai is the director at the Women's Legal Center. Thanks very much indeed once again for your time.